What is up, everybody, and welcome to my temporary garage. So today we're going to start working on the cooling system, and when we're done all that, we'll get back and discuss where I'm at in my garage build process, plus I have some big news for the MR2 build. Let's get to it. Alright, so since this is no normal cooling system that we're working with, let's go over the parts we're going to need to start. So to begin, we have a 50 gallon per minute water pump. This is from Jegs, and this comes with absolutely no provisions on how to mount it other than make your own mounting bracket, so we'll get to that shortly. And to run this, we will need a relay. So these are these fused relays I did a video on not too long ago. Just makes the life a lot easier, so we'll have to wire this in. So additionally, we're going to need some silicone hoses. I do have some really nice electrical connectors we're going to get to in just a minute for hooking up the fans. And because I have the slanted radiator, we're going to use something called a swirl pot, which may be mounted in the front and it may be mounted in the rear, but we'll have to work that out as things come together. And lastly, we have two 10-inch electric fans, which also going to need a relay for each, and we're going to wire them to the ECU to be programmed to turn on when the engine hits a certain temperature. So let's get to looking at how exactly and where to mount this electric water pump. Alright, so as far as radiator hoses goes, the original hard line, I made one simple cut there out of the 45-degree silicone coupler, which gets me from the low side all the way through to the back of the car. And on this side, this is the driver's side, I had to do one single cut there so I could clock that front part of the hard pipe at a different angle. So just one coupler there, and that gets me to the other side of the car. So let's get back to plumbing the actual water pump. Alright, so here we are under the car, and just for reference, this is the passenger side over here. The front of the car is that way. These are my two metal radiator lines, so I have an upper and a lower. This being the lower, which needs to get fed to the water pump, which should be somewhere in this area. So what little information I've learned from the instructions on this unit is this must be at the lowest part almost, or in between the lowest points in the cooling system. So if I put it in this general area, it would allow me to have the outlet lower than the inlet, which is what it's asking for, and put this about this location. And it's still requiring me to run a 90-degree up to the engine mount that I've already made, or the engine manifold that I've already made. Additionally, another hose that comes out of here 90s into this. So let's start out by coming up with how we're going to mount this to the engine or the chassis. Okay, here just having a closer look at the template I made to hold this water pump. This is the section that's going to hold the chassis, where the bulkhead is, and the upper part of the firewall is going to run this way, and this tab here is going to hang on to the engine cross member. So as well as these are our mounting locations in the through hole for that water pump. As you can see, I've had several different revisions of how I wanted to mount this thing. I had a single mount, and nothing's really seemed to work out to where I thought it was going to be without problem, so we wound up with this version. So let's transfer this over to steel, and we'll see where we can go with from there. So we go from paper template to a steel bracket just like that. And now from here, we can actually lay this in the car and see how everything bolts up. Alright, here's that bracket just temporarily placed in here with the pump mounted. You can see where it comes back and is going to mount to the cross member. And at this point it allows me to screw on the, or attempt to screw in the outlet bung. So from there, gotta bring this water line out, down, and to that water line there. So it's just going to take some work and some hose. Alright, quick radiator hose tip. So I needed some very custom and not likely hose to fit my vehicle. So what I did was bend up a piece of coat hanger to the actual specifications that I needed, and went perusing the local auto parts store to see what they had off the shelf that may fit these angles and the inner diameter that I needed. And just like that, come across one of these. This is a Continental. Turns out it's a lower radiator hose for something, probably like a Nissan. The number is Probably can't focus on that, but right off the shelf part, and this is how well it matched up. So will require just a little bit of trimming and we should be good to go. So let's fit this on the vehicle. Alright, now that I've cut up all these random pieces of radiator hose, let's climb back under the car and see how this all lines up. Alright, well there's really no good way to film this. However, here we are under the car and you can see these are the radiator hoses all plumbed up. You can see that angle fit from the actual water pump, comes down all the way to the front of the car and vice versa. And I plumbed them all the way upwards to the top of the engine. So we will go climb up and I'll show you the top side. Alright, here we are looking through the access panel I made. So this is the custom water pump manifold that I created. And it's a little rough. I still have to clean it up. However, here's what we wound up with. So this is the return line, comes over, which comes down to where we were earlier. And it is mounted to the side of that firewall, which you can't see from this angle. And vice versa on the pump side. Makes that 90-degree down, turns back into the pump. This completes the circuit. So from here, we need to discuss the swirl pot. Alright, time to take a second look at the swirl pot and why I'm using it. There's two basic reasons I'm using a swirl pot. So I need an additional filler location, which will be the highest point in the cooling system. Additionally, anything with an LS swap has a steam port or a steam vent off the top heads of the motor. It needs to be plugged into this to help evaporate and burp all the air out of the system. So let's have some looks in how we're going to install this. Alright, as a refresher, at the front of the car I now have relocated the fuel filler to the front. So that's going to be the fuel filler neck, and in finding a location to put the swirl pot, I have decided it will fit in here when a bracket is applied. So this is where I'm thinking this is going to go. So in the meantime, we're going to start plumbing this thing up. Alright, and to hook all this up, I have 16 feet of 8mm heater hose. So we're going to start hooking this up by connecting it to the steam port vent inside the car. Let's climb back in. Alright, we're just going to pull this up from the bottom and slide it right over the steam port vent. And we'll come back later and clamp this off with a hose clamp. In the meantime, we're going to work on routing this and bringing it to the front of the car. Alright, we pulled this through this access hole. We have our excess. Trim it to fit, so I'm going to leave just a little bit extra on here. So we'll cut it. Temporarily install it and on to the next one. Alright, for the low side that drains back into the low side of the system, it's going to connect here. So we'll plug it in, and from here I have to plug it into the low side of the radiator. So I'm going to have to come up with a revision to here. So in the meantime, I've got plenty of material. This is where we'll cut it. So the main feed, we'll just go ahead from here. Hook that up, and where this is going, it's going to be straight ahead to the radiator filler cap, which we'll now discuss. Alright, here we can see the distance relationship or height relationship to the main radiator cap, which is here, and my purge or swirl tank, which is up on the top. This is going to feed the purge tank. However, we're going to have to modify this radiator cap. So in the meantime, I can still come through, hook this up to the overflow, which is no longer an overflow. So now that this is hooked up to feed my swirl pot, we can take this radiator cap off and we're going to modify it. So to make this work, we need a zero pressure radiator cap. So we can go out and buy one and just missing this lower spring section, and it will still seal on the top. However, all we gotta do is break this. So this particular radiator cap, pop off this lower seal, and now it has a hole that goes straight through and it'll bleed out over here. So however, we're going to make that hole a little bit bigger so we flow a little bit water better. So that's it. This will no longer hold pressure and it will constantly push out water through the overflow port, which now feeds our swirl pot. Now we just got to plumb that lower feed tube into the lower line. So obviously there's no place for it here. So we're just going to have to make a place. And we'll take this off and we'll take it to the bench. Alright, here's that lower pipe taken off the car. You can see I did a little bead roll on the opposite end that I cut previously to make it all fit. And here's the hole we need to make. And to do that, we're going to use this adapter nut. So this is a 1/8 inch NPT fitting, which is going to fit in here. First thing we got to do now is drill a hole in there. Now we got to make it bigger. See how that fits. Alright, ready to go. Now it's on to welding. However, as you'll notice, I mentioned I'm here, I have no place to weld, so I have to bring this to a friend. And we'll get back to this shortly. So I'm sure you know that I'm not going to leave this thing zip tied to the car, so I made a relatively basic bracket. I'll put it up here, and it's going to weld into the fuel filler bracket. So just send that out to get welded also. Alright, here it is. I got my parts back from my welder friend. So you can see he did a really good job welding that bung in there. Got my 1/8 inch NPT fitting already put into it. And as well I got the reservoir tank bracket. So let's get this mounted up on the car. And here we are all put together. There is a swirl pot on its mounting bracket. The fuel filler, which is routed through there, and the lower radiator hose plumbed around into the bottom of that swirl pot. All pretty much done. We're just having to add that last bung there for the burp tank, or the surge tank. Alright, next up we're going to address these cooling fans. The problem that I have with them are they came with these male and female connector ends, and the kit did not come with the opposing side. Therefore, to make these match the car side of this was basically next to impossible. So my solution to that is buying weather pack connectors. So these are for a 10 gauge wire, and these will work great for this application. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut off these ends, and we're going to wire in these weather pack connectors on both the car side and the fan side. Alright, now here is the best part, is clicking these connectors right into place, and these are labeled A and B, so to match them up what I have on the other side. My ground is in the A, and the positive is in the B. If you can hear this or not, but it will click right into place. There we go. And now we put in our actual waterproof seals. And then we lock them all into place with this little back end connector here. And just like that, we're good to go. So we're going to repeat this process on the car side next. Alright, here we have the fans now hooked up. Driver side and passenger side. As you can see, here's the fan sitting on the radiator. I originally made a shroud that held both of these. However, as soon as I pulled them off I ran into some interference on this cross member. So it looks like I'm going to leave them just mounted to the radiator itself, but I'm not going to clamp them down just yet because there's a good chance this will all come back out soon. So while we're here, let's do a quick functions test. Also, there are my dual relays with the fuses that runs both of these fans from the LS ECU. So let's start them up. See how it works on the reverse side. Put some paper up to it. Seems to be pulling a good amount of air through here. I can actually feel it sucking from about 6 to 8 inches away from the radiator, so it pulls it up really well. Alright, so there it is. I made some progress and I have a cooling system pretty much figured out. So on the garage news, why am I in here still? A lot of things have happened. My first contractor fell through. He just couldn't get the job done. So I went out and found somebody else. I have a contract right now with him. However, he says it's a 6-month layover until he can actually get the thing finished. So that's what we're waiting for. So in the meantime, I'm going to be getting as much stuff done as I can in this garage as possible, so we're ready to move on to bigger things. Which brings up the bigger things. What is coming up? I do have some of the best suspension coming for this car. I'm really excited about it. It's going to make my alignments of everything work great with the Porsche knuckles that I've installed. So stay tuned for all that, and we're probably going to get to that once the new garage is done. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.